Hello, it's Mary Fenwick here. I write the Agony Aunt column for Psychologies magazine. Psychologies magazine is the UK's best-selling mindful living magazine, and I have just signed up to do every week on a Tuesday at 5:30. Hi, hello, let me know where you're joining from when you say hello. Every Tuesday at 5:30 it'll be weekly wisdom. Hi, lovely to see you joining. My aim with these sessions is to give the lovely Psychologies magazine community the chance to ask questions live. So ordinarily I'm writing once a month in the magazine and answering readers' questions, and this is going to be a time. Hi Hazel, hi Louise, hi Laura. This is going to be a time that I'm here, 5:30 every Tuesday, answering your questions live. If you've got something that you want to talk to me about, bring your questions on a Tuesday at 5:30 here on the Psychologies magazine page. Now, just to say that if you want the latest issue of Psychologies magazine delivered to your door, hi in Durban, if you want the latest issue of Psychologies magazine delivered to your door, have a look in the bio for the latest offers. And also, Psychologies magazine is now completely plastic free in the wrapping. So it's very aesthetically pleasing when it comes through the door, I find it. So, do you know, one of the funniest things for me is looking at the photo which was promoting this, and that photo was taken 7 years ago when I started writing for the magazine, and my hair is probably, I don't know, probably similar length actually. I've just got it pinned up at the moment, but my hair colour has radically changed in those 7 months. 7 years. I've gone blonde, brownie, brombre, something like that. Yeah, it'll probably change as soon as I get back to a hairdresser as well. So I have the privilege of writing the monthly Agony Aunt column for Psychologies magazine, and this is your opportunity to ask me anything, and my opportunity, I guess, to tell you a few stories, tell you what else I'm working on, and see if any of that sparks questions for you. So apart from writing for Psychologies, I also work as a one-to-one coach, particularly for women in leadership, and I run workshops for leaders and teams at work, and that's what I've been doing today. Today we've been talking about setting priorities, and we're doing a series of workshops for the British Red Cross, who are in turn themselves doing a lot to support the NHS in this time with COVID-19. And so my mind today has been on how do we set our priorities, and particularly, right, thank you Hazel, looking after a garden, blonde is looking good as a blonde. Yeah, I still don't mentally think of myself as a blonde all the time. So today I've been talking about how do we set our priorities, and always I'm really interested in the ways in which these things that we might talk about in general in leadership, they're different. They're different for women. They're different, for example, for single parents. They're different for people of colour. And one of the things I was talking about today is saying no. So I wonder how relevant saying no might be to your life at the moment. I'm an absolute evangelist for the power of saying no. You cannot set priorities or strategy or carry out a plan without saying no, because if you can't say no, then it's going to be everybody else's agenda that carries the day. You have to be able to say no to other people's suggestions sometimes to be able to carry yours to fruition. One of the things I've been talking about today has been the power of saying a constructive no. And I started by talking about how there is academic research which shows that it is more difficult for women to say no. There is more of a kind of a burden to say no for women, and that's for a couple of reasons. One is that women get asked for help more, and that's because of the stereotype that we all carry, that's both men and women carry this stereotype and this it's called a prescriptive, that's what we expect, a prescriptive stereotype, that we expect women to be more helpful. We expect them to be more kind of communally orientated, to look after the group, maybe even more than their own individual interests. So women will get asked to help more. And then women will also pay a higher penalty, what's known as a backlash, when they do say no. And that is, again, because of the stereotype that we all carry. And part of the frame is that we expect women to be helpful, as I've already said, and when we are disappointed, we kind of hold it against women more than we hold it against men. And the primary researcher that I talk about in respect of all this is a woman called Joan Williams. She is a law professor. She's the author of a book called What Works for Women at Work. And in her field, she is in the top 10 most cited academics. And in fact, one of her articles is the most read article in the Harvard Business Review ever. Millions. So Joan Williams is the researcher who talks about how it is a bit more difficult for women to say no. They're asked more often, they pay a higher penalty for saying no. Now, when I'm talking about this, I also want to acknowledge that this has an impact on other people who are not straight white men. Because we have this image, all of us, again, it's nobody's deliberately being bad or mean and setting this up. This is our collective expectation as a society, is that there will be white men in charge in leadership positions. And we are all of us are treating women or people of colour or non-cis people who are in those positions with a bit more power, we're treating them as the exception and men as the norm. So, for example, one of the statistics I was quoting today, which is from, again, an HBR piece by Joan Williams, was talking about how at work there tends to be some work which is regarded as kind of the glamour work. It's the work that gets you promoted. There's a woman called Lisa Unwin on LinkedIn, who I really recommend as well. She is a lawyer and she runs the Reignite Academy, and she talks about this as well, that women at work need to keep their eye on the money. Keep their eye on doing work which contributes to the overall strategy or the bottom line of the business. And this is the type of work that Joan Williams calls the glamour work. As I'm talking, I'm the agony aunt for Psychologies magazine, Mary Fenwick, and I'm doing a weekly wisdom call at 5:30 every Tuesday, and this is your opportunity to ask questions. So I'm keeping an eye on people joining, and let me know where you're joining from, and it's lovely to see people waving and saying hello. But if anything that I'm saying strikes a chord and that you've got a question, just jump in and I'll do my best to answer it in the moment. I've been using this also as an opportunity to talk a bit about the other work that I do, which is particularly supporting women in leadership. I run... Oh, thank you, Susan. So I'm talking about a couple of workshops that I did today with the British Red Cross, and we were talking about setting priorities, we were talking about saying no. And we were talking about how saying no has a different impact for women than it does for men. And that's to do with the stereotypes that we all carry, that we're expecting women to be more helpful, and we ask them more often for help. And when they are not helpful, we're more disappointed and we hold it against them. So saying no has a different impact for women as compared to men. And I'm quoting an academic called Joan Williams. She talks about the difference between glamour work, the work that gets you promoted, basically, and what she calls office housework, which is keeping things ticking over. Now, slightly controversially, that might even include things like mentoring. Unless you position it as part of your job, strategic job role and talk about how it contributes to the company, mentoring is something that might not contribute to you getting promoted. And it might... Okay, how do you, I've got a question here. Social anxiety, loneliness, and then when you're with people you crave solitude. Okay, that's a different subject from what I'm talking about. I'm going to try and park that question, come back to you. DeLorne Govender, how do you handle social anxiety and loneliness, and then when you're with people you crave solitude? Oh, it sounds really tough. That sounds really tough. I'll just finish my little thing about Joan Williams and come back to that. So, one of the statistics that Joan Williams was talking about was, this is a US study, that in a survey of lawyers, women lawyers of colour were carrying out 20% more admin tasks than white men. Now, that is obviously going to have an impact in terms of whether you look promotable. If you're doing more admin, you are simply not as visible when it comes to thinking about promotion and leadership. So I was talking about saying no today in terms of setting priorities. And I'm just going to wrap up talking about that before I come back to that question about craving company and then craving solitude when you're in company, okay? So the model that we were talking about today to say what is known as a constructive or positive no, this comes from work by William Ury, which is spelled U-R-Y, William Ury, and he is one of the co-founders of the Harvard Negotiation Project. And he talks about being able to say a constructive no. And it's actually, it's a bit like a no sandwich, basically. The constructive no takes the format of going yes, no, yes. And it starts by saying yes to the underlying value or need that you want to express or protect. So, for example, it might be we want to maintain standards of quality in the service that we deliver. That is the yes. You're saying yes to the quality and standards of the service that you deliver. That's the foundation. The next level of your constructive no is to set a limit. And that might be something like, I can't get you the answer today because I couldn't maintain the quality of our service if I answered. So you're saying yes to the quality of your service, and you're saying no, I can't get the answer to you today because I couldn't maintain the quality if I get you that answer today. And then the final yes is a relationship building yes. And this is something that women also tend to be particularly concerned about. They fear that by saying no, they're going to damage the relationship, or we fear we're going to damage the relationship. So the way to deal with that is to say an explicit yes about acknowledging the value of the relationship at the end. So you've said yes to the underlying value or need, no to be able to set a limit, and then you say yes to acknowledge the relationship and make a move towards rebuilding. And that might be something like, let's work together to set a realistic timetable where we can keep to the same high quality, and I can give you a deadline that is realistic. So your yes, no, yes, which is the constructive way of saying no, is saying yes, first of all, to the underlying need. So you need to remind yourself of that. No to set a limit, and yes to acknowledge and possibly even rebuild the relationship. Now, William Ury, when he's describing the power of a positive or constructive no, says that yes, saying yes without a no is appeasement. And saying no without a yes is war. So what I find really interesting about this construction is it makes us think about how both yes and no are intertwined. And one of the things I say to the women that when I'm coaching them in leadership is, if you can't say no, what is your yes worth? Every time we do say yes to somebody else's priority, we are perhaps unconsciously saying no to one of our own priorities. Now, one final point before I come back to that question about a bit of social anxiety and then craving solitude when you're with people, because my point is to answer your questions while I'm here if I can. I'm just going to look up this other point that we also shared from William Ury's research about the positive no. And this is a really concrete example which certainly spoke to me, and I guess must speak to many of us at work. So the example is, if a colleague asks you to stay late to help them with a last-minute project, start by saying something like, that might be difficult. Help me understand what you need. That way, you give them the courtesy of hearing them out, and it will allow you to frame your positive no in a way that is the least damaging to the relationship, because you've actually listened to what they need. So this comes under the heading of listening and managing expectations. When you say up front, that might be difficult, help me understand what you need, you have also signalled that what they're asking might not be possible. To summarise those 4 points that I'm actually making about the power of a positive no, a positive no has got the yes, no, yes construction. You say yes to the underlying principle, need or value. You say no to set a limit, to protect that underlying need or value. And you say yes to acknowledging and rebuilding that relationship. And the extra sauce that you can add is in the power of your listening and interaction. Because if you can manage to listen deeply and well to the other person's underlying need, you will be able to frame your no and your yes in a way that acknowledges that need. So I hope that as a kind of package is a useful way to think about how you can say no a bit more often at work, retain your own integrity, maintain relationships, and make sure that your priorities also get acknowledged. Now I want to talk a bit about the question that I saw earlier. I don't know how many people were on, but the question was, what do you do if you have some social anxiety Thank you, Susan. I'm really glad that was helpful. I'll be back next week. What do you do if you have some social anxiety, and so you've got these kind of mixed feelings about you kind of want to be with people, but when you're with people, you crave solitude? Now, the person who asked, I wonder if you are still on the call, because it would be really helpful if you could give me any more detail about a specific situation that you're thinking about, because it certainly sounds kind of tiring and confusing to go through this cycle of emotions again and again. And what I'm going to suggest is probably a technique called emotional agility. And hi, lovely to see. That's Sawan 123 saying hi. It's really lovely to see where people are joining from. If you can tell me when you waving back. So this challenge of craving company, because obviously as human beings we really, really need social connection. But then it sounds as if this is somebody who is saying that when she is with other people, she possibly quite quickly feels overwhelmed and wants to be alone again. And, somebody joining from Amsterdam. Cool. Oh, love Amsterdam. I wish I was back there. I've got a friend with an apartment in Amsterdam and I had been due to be there in April, maybe doing some writing. So I'm here for my weekly wisdom for Psychologies magazine. I'm Mary Fenwick. I write the Agony Out column for Psychologies. Oh, somebody from India. Hello, welcome. I'm originally from New Zealand, by the way, and somebody from Kenya, even though I'm coming to you from Woking in Surrey, I am originally from New Zealand. And I'm answering a question. Swansea, South Wales. Hello, Joe Agar. Oh, love the magazine. I love the magazine too. I love it. I'm answering a question from somebody who's saying she craves company on one level, but then she finds that she craves solitude when she's with people. The first step I would be interested in is approaching those emotions on both sides with a bit of gentle curiosity. I think gentle curiosity is one of the most magical mindsets. It's very respectful, it's very open, you are not being judgmental, you're just curious. If you can approach that emotion with some gentle curiosity, what is it that you're craving, that you want from your connection with other people? Think of a time where that has worked for you, and think about what were the circumstances that made that connection work for you. It might be environment. It might be, for example, this would be not unusual, I think, for somebody with social anxiety. It might be that a kind of a side-by-side interaction is a bit easier than a face-to-face. So even though people often say meet for coffee, it might be that doing a side-by-side activity is a bit better for you. That might be going for a walk together. I have a bit more of an introverted preference, which is not unusual for somebody who is a writer like me. So I love going for a walk with a friend. That is just absolutely a win-win for me. It means we're talking, we're somewhere outside, we're getting exercise. There's something about moving your legs makes my brain tick over differently. And I find that side-by-side kind of silence easier. I find it easier to accept that we're both looking at something. We're kind of side-by-side looking out at something together rather than looking at each other. And if you have some social anxiety, okay, so you love company. Tell me more about loving company. Honestly, because this is what I find again and again. the answer is usually in the actual detail of the situation, that you do get overwhelmed. Okay, it's easier with friends, yeah, but more difficult when in a crowd and you don't know everyone. That's completely true. And for some people, that's a buzz. And for some people, it's just not. All of us have a bit of both those needs for company and solitude. So you're craving company, but you do get overwhelmed. I'm going to say mostly I am with you. And I have a reputation among my friends for leaving early. And they actually call it doing a Frexit. It's the Mary Fenwick exit. And that's partly because they also know sometimes British people would call it a French exit, and I'm a Francophile, so I wouldn't ever be rude about the French. But because my surname starts with Fenwick, my friends tend to call the fact that I will leave a gathering doing a Frexit. So I will be having a perfectly lovely time until the moment where I am just not. And what I find is it very rarely gets better once I've started feeling that way. Maybe it's almost a little bit like a social muscle, you know. I get exhausted. I get worn out with that type of interaction, especially in a crowd and with people that I don't know. I'm using up a lot of energy and I might just run out of battery. And if I get to that point, for me, it's better to acknowledge it and take care of myself by leaving. And I will usually do that very quietly without saying goodbye to people. This might be a bit controversial depending on your rules of social conduct, but I would always get in touch with a key person afterwards. I might kind of whisper to one person, just to let you know, I'm going to leave. Don't worry, I'll be fine, and I'll message you when I get home. So just so that you don't set alarm bells ringing. But mostly I would just leave at the point at which I kind of need to take care of myself. And I would do the thanking and the making amends if necessary afterwards. So this is my argument from long years of experience of being me, loving company, but also being overwhelmed, is take care of yourself. You are there to enjoy the social experience. And as they say, in another context, which is about gambling, when the fun stops, stop. If you are getting overwhelmed in a social situation, you are allowed to look after yourself. And the phrase in English is take your leave. You are allowed to just take your leave. You don't have to wait for somebody to give you permission to go. And one of the reasons that I don't necessarily say goodbye in that circumstance is because I think if I call attention to my departure by saying goodbye, I'm kind of distracting everybody else from the party, from the fun that they might be having. And in my mind, I'd be interested in other people's opinion, but in my mind, it's a more polite and considerate thing to do to just quietly leave, thank people afterwards. Current lockdown. Oh, wow. Single working mum of twins going through nasty divorce. Oh, my goodness. Wow. That is so tough. Okay, and somebody wants me to come back to the last yes of the yes, no, yes technique. Okay. I'm holding the single mum of twins going through divorce in my mind while I just answer this specific question. Okay, I'm coming back to you. The last yes of the yes, no, yes technique is acknowledging and doing what you can to build and demonstrate your regard and respect for that relationship. So the whole point of the yes, no, yes technique is it's about respect for both you and your priorities and the other person and their priorities. So the final yes is something like, how can I work with you to set a realistic deadline that we could both have faith in? And it's really important to build trust because trust is the basis of all the teamwork. Pip Kilty, don't worry, I know it's a tall order, just any preliminary ideas. I am going to come back to you, Pip. Honestly, my heart goes out to you. So I think I've answered the last yes of the yes, no, yes technique. It's to acknowledge and respect the other person's agenda and to invite them to collaborate if that is realistic. But one of the points about the yes, no, yes technique is setting boundaries so that everybody knows what they're expecting, because it takes a lot more time and effort. That's right. Yes, no, yes. It takes a lot more time and effort if you've accidentally overcommitted, if you've said yes to something that is actually beyond your limits and you can't achieve. It takes you more time to unpick it and to reschedule. Now I'm going to come back to, thank you, Laura. I'm glad that helped and was interesting. I'm going to come back to Pip Kilty, who is a single mum of twins going through a nasty divorce under lockdown. Man, oh man, that is a stack of poo, quite frankly. I don't know if it helps to say that there are many levels in which I can quite directly sympathise with you. In that, if we just take a little snapshot of me, when my youngest child was 10 weeks old, I triggered my divorce from my first husband. And it became very nasty indeed. I lost my job over that period of time. I had 3 children under 4, so 4, 2 and a baby. I was literally breastfeeding. I'd lost my job. I was getting divorced and my father was dying. And so my number one thing is to say, you have more resources than you are probably consciously aware of right now. Anything that you can do which builds up tiny, tiny little moments of joy in your life, of a positive emotion, is really worthwhile. So you are looking for the tiny little sparks of interest, hope, love, joy, amusement. That's a really useful one. Honestly, the therapeutic power of having a laugh in those circumstances is enormous. And laughter is a very social emotion. We are something like 30 times more likely to laugh when we're with another person than when we are on our own. So if you can this would be possibly, depending on whether you had to get a babysitter, I was going to say this might be cheaper than therapy, would be going to a live comedy club or watching. But ideally, setting yourself up in some sort of situation where you're having a laugh with your friends, even if you're having a laugh about how farcically hideous and horrible your life is at the moment, which honestly, I'm calling you Pip because that's what it sounds like, your name, Pip Kilty. And if you can find it within yourself to find friends that will help you see the funny side of this hideous situation, I hope that might help. To give you an example of the kind of black humour that sometimes helps me, and honestly, one of my messages is don't necessarily take anybody else's word for it, but you can be your own guru. You have all the resources you need. I'm sure you have everything you need. I want to tell a little story about the black humour in my own situation. So I left my first husband. That was a good move. that was a really, really good move. It was a hideous divorce. I had to go into hiding with my children for a period of time. Any book about what I've just explained, very helpful in stressful situations. The Power of Positive Emotions, look for Barbara Fredrickson. She is the researcher. I would say, I'm not sure about her book so much. Humour is needed. The ex is overseas. We had to flee with a suitcase. Narcissistic, abusive man, sadly. I do not need to laugh a lot more. I'm not sure. I do need to laugh more. I'm not sure. Humour is needed, yeah. So, divorcing my first husband was hideous. And what I would say is the more nasty that it is, the more it reinforces that you're making the right decision. I know it's really hard to hold on to it, but divorce... Oh, okay, you do need to laugh, good, yeah. So I'll tell you my story. It's got some background before I can kind of tell you the punchline. So, hideous situation, divorcing my first husband, absolutely the right thing. Gratitude that I could divorce him. Divorced him, remarried, absolutely in love with my second husband. He was the most lovely man, and sadly he died. We were together for 9 years, relationship, and I was incredibly, incredibly blessed and lucky. And I'm obviously, I don't know if it's obvious to somebody who hasn't gone through it. On a certain level, I still love my second husband. He died, but I still love him. Doesn't mean I can't love somebody else, but it's like having you can love more than one child. I can love more than one man, especially when the man that I loved first is dead. Been divorced, and then I was widowed. So I don't know if you're familiar with the King Henry VIII in England. Had 6 wives, and the kind of children's nursery rhyme about what happened to his wives is divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. So at this point, I've been divorced, I've had a husband who died, and sometimes if I'm feeling like it doesn't go down very well, I say, maybe my next husband will be beheaded. He'll be a brave man to get involved with me, because after I've had the experience of being divorced and having my husband die, maybe the next one is due to be beheaded. It's a big risk. So Pip, find anything that is remotely entertaining. My other top tips, every single day that I survived, that I got through, I would put £1 in a jar, and at the end of the month, I would buy a bottle of champagne. I was a massive believer in shallow therapy, and this has continued. Like, I don't know if you can tell at the moment, fake tan, love it. Anything that makes me look better, feel better. I've got this bizarre obsession with eyelashes. Like, I'll get eyelash extensions, an eyelash tint and perm, shallow and frivolous, manicure, pedicure, any tiny little shallow therapy. Shallow therapy is my top tip. Keeping a journal might help. I'm saying that because I do really believe in the power of journaling, but I do think that there are some circumstances, and there is some research about this that says an ongoing situation where the outcome is uncertain is not necessarily the best format for journaling. Journaling can work really well in terms of dealing with a trauma, even something quite big, which is past, but it's kind of packaged. So Oh, love that you're so real with us. Makes us feel good about who we are. Well, thank you. Thank you. I'd hate anybody to think that I've got all the answers, because I haven't even got all the answers for myself. But I mean this sincerely. It has been a gift in my life to go through so much. It is all part of life. Hi, Nikki. Hi. Lovely to see Nikki. I've worked with Nikki on the magazine. Nikki's another coach and commercial director of Psychologies magazine. Going through talking about, in response to a question about somebody who is single mother of twins and going through a hideous divorce under lockdown, and any suggestions that might help her sanity. So Nikki, or anybody else who's on this call, if you've got similar stories, drop them in the chat. I'm actually just about to wrap up though, because in my mind I'm going to do these for about half an hour. We'll see how we go. 5:30 every Tuesday. I'm Mary Fenwick. I write the Agony Aunt column for Psychologies magazine. I'll be back next Tuesday at 5:30. Bring your questions. In the meantime, if you put on her own oxygen mask first. Yeah, so tough though, isn't it? So tough, especially, honestly, you're probably not sleeping that well. So important to look after yourself. In the meantime, thank you, Pip. I'm glad that helped a bit. In New Zealand, where I come from, in Maori, they would say kia kaha, have strength. Take whatever help is offered, says Nikki. Definitely. Build your team. That would be another one. Yep, definitely build your team. In the meantime, what would be my Insta ID? I'm Mary the Fenwick. Nikki, would you mind dropping my thing in, my handle in? I'll put it in the comments somewhere. Mary the Fenwick. F for Freddie, ENWICK. If you would like a copy of Psychologies magazine, the UK's best-selling mindful living magazine, if you would like it delivered to your door, have a look for the latest offer in the Psychology. Net is playing up a bit. I hope it's not too jerky for you. But I thank you, Nikki. Brilliant. That's my handle, Mary the Fenwick. And I will be back next Tuesday, 5:30, answering your questions. I'm really, really glad that helped. Lovely to see you all. See you next week. Bye.